Well, welcome to the Sunday night Dr. Defacto Live. We're going to talk about gang stalking. Sorry if anybody tried to get on. I tried to go live and something happened on my phone, so I just deleted. I deleted that. It was less than I don't know 10 seconds or something like that. We got a thumbs up out there, which is kind of weird because it isn't showing anyone on here. That's obviously a glitch. Here we got someone who is out there. We got nothing on the comments yet. Well, anyway, welcome. Welcome to Dr. DeFacto on Sunday night. And as usual, we're going to discuss gang stalking. We're going to discuss a few things. This is probably going to be a short live stream unless I get on a tangent, which sometimes will happen. I've been taking the day off. So if I start clearing my throat because usually I don't sit around and talk to myself. Now that's not always the case, you know. But I haven't been today, so if my throat gets kind of scratchy and I, I might have to clear my throat. I apologize for that up front. Let's see here. Well, we've got three people out there. Oh, what to talk about before we really get on this? Well, I guess we can just talk about the basic fact that having a targeted individual community is, well, it's beneficial for a lot of reasons. And we're going to talk about some of that stuff because targets are isolated. And I know for me that it's a social outlet. I don't have a lot of those. And it's not just, I mean, it's one thing to get together and talk to people. I mean, I have that option, but it's different with a targeted individual community because the problem with you socializing with, I don't know, regular people in society is that you can't really connect with them. You don't really have that bond, that common element in your life. And it's a big deal when you're a targeted individual. It's a huge deal. I mean, it's affected my life in a major way. I would consider it a major part of my life. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous. You feel isolated, you feel alone, and then you go to a meeting and there's people there. There's individuals who can share with you. You can kind of get out of your head, get into other experiences, and you can learn things. I know it's important to have that, and so I'm grateful. I'm thankful to have a targeted individual community, to have other people that I can relate with, that I can connect with, that know what I'm talking about. Because I've talked about this before. You can go explain what's happening to you to other people, and they're not gonna believe you. They're not gonna understand. You're gonna get those looks. You're gonna have all kinds of negative feedback at a high percentage, and that's not something that anyone enjoys. So you got to pretend like nothing's going on. And I've talked about the fact that for me, that's really the only way this is going to work. Every time, especially in the beginning of this whole thing, I would try to talk to someone about it. Um, Even if they pretended like they could kind of understand what I was getting at, eventually it went bad. It always went bad. And you get accusations, you get people who are trying to, kind of, I don't know, decipher and pick away at the details of what you're trying to tell them, because in their mind, either, unless they're in on it, they think you're crazy. So, they've listened to you talk about whatever you've gone through, and then they'll go, "Oh, well, what about this or what about that?" And they'll try to check you, which you can understand. I mean, I've had that experience where I've had someone come up and start telling me this tall tale or whatever, and then it gets to the point where you're tired of listening to it because it's almost offending you because it's not believable, and so you kind of try and shut it down. And that would always happen, or you get accused of talking in circles or whatever. Gang stalking is a circular scenario when targets are triggered. when they're in that place where they're thinking about their harassment, you are thinking in circles, and that's one of the things that you have to remember is that gang stalking is designed that way. It's designed to get you in a place where you're, kind of, on a hamster wheel mentally. You get triggered constantly. You run into the same dilemma over and over because, of course, everybody just wants to live their life. Everybody just wants to get back to normal, but of course you can't because it's a gang stalking, and of course, why is the gang stalking going on? And then you just come full circle and you go back to it, and what are you going to do? And it'll drive you nuts, you know. And that's one of the things that you have to remember. And so distracting yourself is important. Realizing first that you are in a scenario that, you know, it is not really in your control. I mean, there's things that you control. You want to have as much environmental authority as you possibly can, but you can't control other people. You cannot control other people's decisions. You can't make them stop. Okay. And you are outnumbered. When you're getting the higher forms of harassment, there's really nothing you can do. You go everywhere and you're being traumatized, and you get into that stage where you're being sensitized, and there's the brainwashing. We're going to get into that a little bit, but you have to know right away that not reacting and trying to get out of that rut, that mental rut of thinking about this stuff all the time, in the sense, not in a productive way, but in the sense that you are trying to solve it. When you get into that solution based, I don't know, mental, grind, it's a problem because you can't control what these people are doing. You don't even know why they're doing it, especially for new targeted individuals. Um, that's where you really have to be focused, and you have to focus on the motive of gang stalking because they want you to be in that state of anxiety. They want you to be regurgitating this stuff. They want you on that hamster wheel, and they want to take your focus away. They want you reading into everything. They want you thinking about it no matter what's going on. It doesn't matter whether you're just having a regular conversation with someone. Eventually, they want you to be so consumed with this harassment, so brainwashed and traumatized by all the stuff that's happened to you that there isn't a moment in your life where you're not thinking about gang stalking, where you're not worried that someone is, trying to communicate with you in some type of hidden code or whatever. And that's famous with gang stalking is that, when you get into that place where you experience the trauma, where they freak you out, they get your attention. Okay. You might get subtle hints at first, and then of course you get the aggressive stuff. You might experience, the break-ins. Up to that point, you might experience things that would lead into that type of hidden code communication, right? You might be getting keywords or key phrases from people. They might be people you know. It might be a mixture of people you have no idea who they are, and it just seems a little odd to you, or it might be other things too, and that goes into the sensitization process. But that's really a form of communication, right? Where the target can be communicated with in plain sight of a group of individuals who have not been sensitized to something, and they have no idea what what your deal is. If you were to tell people, hey, what's up with that, or confront someone about something that you have been sensitized to, whatever it is, whether it's, a phrase or whistling a tune or a particular type of object, or, maybe a particular type of shirt, or, whatever, sign language, you name it, they could just write it off, right? Because other people have not been sensitized. They're not paying attention to it. And right away, you're going to get those things. And then it's going to move into the stage where you're like, whoa, I am being hunted down for whatever reason. I don't know what's going on, but this is serious now. And then, of course, the fear tactics come into play, and targeted individuals they experience, that type of I don't know, street theater or directed conversations that would lead the target to believe that they have really offended someone, okay, or they did something wrong, or people are not happy with you in general, whatever it is, or you're a person of suspicion, right? Because at that point, the activity is really mysterious. Most targeted individuals haven't really done anything wrong. I mean, there are things that I think everybody has in their past. They like to dig up dirt or whatever, but for the most part, none of those things, in a higher percentage of cases, would justify gang stalking, right? The star chamber treatment, if you will, to where these people are really coming after you. And that's when you get into the disinformation, right? And that's scary for targets because not only are other people buying into that stuff, whether people are starting rumors or you believe that's happening, or you're getting little hints here and there that people believe that you've done something horrible or you're some type of deviant or whatever. A lot of targets are accused of those things, whatever it is, whatever is going to make people feel justified in giving you that type of treatment, or the hate that the targeted individual experiences, because the atmosphere around the target, it has to be that way. Okay. They cannot have help from anyone. Okay. They can't have support. That goes against the whole, motive of breaking down the individual, and then you get into the isolation aspect of this whole thing. And it all is a chain reaction, but it's part of that traumatic invasion. And then a lot of targets experience that sensitization and the conditioning is a type of brainwashing, because it's an invasion in the sense that you're looking for this stuff all the time. And I'm just looking at the comments real quick here. Oh, people are saying hi to each other. That's nice. And it's an invasion into the mind of the target in the sense that now, whatever it is, even if it's just the things that you've been sensitized to, it's an invasion into your mind. It's a type of brainwashing. What's the danger of that, for targets? Anybody want to say anything? The comments are probably going to come through a little slower. Well, I'm not getting anything. Well, the danger is, of course, that the target is going to be reading into things, okay, which plays into dysfunction. And, as far as the perception of other people around the targeted individual, that's just going to discredit them. That's going to make them look nuts. They're going to be wrong about things. But of course, when that happens exponentially, which inevitably it does for all new targets, I would imagine. Okay. Anybody that gets hit with group harassment and the way that targeted individuals experience harassment, it's going to freak them out to the point where they're going to be reading into things. They're going to be extremely paranoid. They're going to be very apprehensive, and they're not going to be thinking properly, and they're going to experience a lot of dysfunction. And you know, it's basic mind control at that point. Now, you're moving into the stage of demoralization to where, depending on what the target is dealing with, you could be experiencing, along with that type of brainwashing, along with the dysfunction, a lot of sleep deprivation. You're probably not going to be eating properly. There's going to be a lot of things that are just accumulating. Okay, harassment is an accumulative scenario. Okay, and that can take a long time, or it can happen gradually. Even you know, or I guess I should have said it can happen very quickly, but it can also accumulate over time. Sorry about that. It's been one of those days, guys, where I've just been kind of half out of it. I'm taking a day off, trying to recoup. But which is worse, because the shock and awe that a targeted individual will experience is enough to take them off kilter. And of course, they're on an emotional roller coaster now, because all these things move in to a type of emotional manipulation. Okay. And the worst thing that you can do at that point is to start processing, your reaction in the wrong way. Because if you do, you're playing right into their strategy. If you start to process, the things that are happening to you in this whole scenario where you're being harassed, you're being followed around, you're being tortured basically, and you become paranoid. You're having trust issues. Your work performance is gone. You might not want to leave the house. Everything's going to be thrown completely off. Your emotions are going to be up and down. And of course, now the disinformation is coming in. The accusations are right around the corner. If you start processing this stuff incorrectly, you're going to give into that. It's going to be gaslighting 101, right? And that's what they want, because when this happens to a targeted individual, assuming that your life before that was semi normal, okay, well, you're going to start to question reality. And when you start to question your own perception and you're getting comments from people, and that goes right back into the benefits of having a targeted individual community. Because when I started this, and I've talked about it before, I didn't have any of those lateral comparisons. I didn't have anybody to give me affirmation at all. Alls I had was a lot of people telling me that something was up. And even if I didn't say anything to the people around me, most of them, they would be trying to get it out. What's wrong? Is there something going on? Are you okay? And I wouldn't be doing anything different. I knew from the beginning, and I've mentioned that before. I knew to keep my mouth shut, man. I tried to explain, maybe when I was drunk and I used to drink a lot, to a couple people, but they would just, the reaction was horrible. You're talking in circles. Are you sure? You know, what do you mean there's witchcraft? What do you mean people are, what are you talking about? And there's so many things that you just don't understand about what's happening, especially if you're into substance abuse like I was for years. I drank a lot of alcohol and then I got hooked on pills and everything. And of course, now you're just hyperactive activating that discrediting process that all targeted individuals experience. And when you start processing information, well, you can get forced in to either playing that game and coming up with an excuse because you don't want to mention what's happening. If the dysfunction that a targeted individual is experiencing is intense enough, what are you going to say? If you know better than to start talking about this stuff, what are you forced to do? Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should go see a doctor. Maybe I should get some, sleeping medication or something. I had to play that game a little bit, and it could be very aggressive because there's going to be people that want to, I don't know, sow the seeds of doubt into the mind of the target. There's going to be people around you. If you're a new targeted individual and you're watching this, there's going to be people around you that not only do they want to give you disinformation, but they want you to question reality. They want you to question yourself and your perception. And eventually they want you to think that this is a type of mental illness. They want you on medications. And I'm not saying that if any of you are out there and you're taking meds, you need to stop taking it or whatever. I would suggest you research the type of medicine that you're on, because some of that stuff can make things worse. But but the whole idea that this is just a type of mental illness or a psychosis or some type of delusion of grandeur or persecutory delusion is what they want. They want that because it further gives them a license to harass the target, in the sense that when a person becomes discredited for whatever reason, it doesn't matter why people are after you, whether they're just trying to play God with you, whether they want to use you as a scapegoat or feed off your negative emotions, watching you become emotional, having control over you, or whether it's some type of spiritual thing where you're wondering if you're dealing with psychic vampires or whatever. I wondered that kind of stuff. It sounds ridiculous, but you wouldn't, if you're a targeted individual who's experiencing stuff, these people get a real kick out of it. And I've seen it, I mean, it's creepy. and you get into the occult and all that, and it's all mixed in, it's all connected. Or maybe you believe that you're being experimented on, you're in some type of government program or whatever. Well, the discrediting process is crucial, and when you buy into that, or when other people believe that you are crazy, well, that's dangerous. Because I mean, even when targets are not discredited, even when they don't come out and start talking about this, even when they don't end up in the hospital or whatever, or even become really dysfunctional, it's dangerous even then. I mean, how'd you get to the point where you were even, noticing this stuff while you're being attacked? And if you get into that place where you lose your credibility, it's just going to be that much worse. It's the last thing you want. And I've talked to people about that before, where they want to react, or they want to get together and start, harassing people or taking names and kicking some butt or whatever. And I would discourage that, because it plays into the strategy. And if you start reacting, if you go out and start trying to get some vigilante justice or whatever, they know. I mean, think about it. If you're really experiencing the classic gang stalking scenario, where they know what's going on in your life and they're watching you and all that. Well, I mean, you try and do something illegal, you're really pushing it. You end up in jail, or dealing with the authorities in any way, shape, or form. That's just going to play into their strategy. And if you get into a jail scenario or in a mental institution, you've just lost that much more freedom. And the last thing you want is anyone to have more control over your atmosphere than is necessary. And there's people out there, even in family situations that are oppressive, where people, in your family are involved in gang stalking, and you're trying to figure out a way to get out. But usually by the time targets figure out what's going on, there's some financial destitution involved. Sometimes the property damage could be involved, or moving around, trying to escape the harassment. I know that hotels can be very expensive, and usually when targets are harassed in the beginning, you know, if you got an apartment, or a place that you're renting or something, they're going to be all over you, and you don't know what's going on, and it's scary. And you can even experience threats. Like I said, sometimes they're going to let you know, however they do that, that you have offended someone, or that whatever is going on with you, they don't like you, and you're going to try to escape, or maybe you're just trying to get some sleep. Hotels are extremely expensive. If you have to do that, I would suggest you get on Priceline or something like that, because you're going to save about 50%. The last time I had to do that was I think it was in 2021. And I actually did I think I'd made some videos during that whole thing, where it was about a week where I got pushed out of my apartment, and I had to go get another place. And luckily I got in here before I had to do the hotel thing. It just sucks the money right out of you. But getting back to the point, you don't have the resources, right? So you feel trapped. Either you react and you get trapped, you're in jail, or you get in a mental institution, or you get in a bad scenario, or you have roommates or something that have turned against you, or whatever. Maybe even a spouse. And what do you do? You know, and I've talked about the fact that if you're a new target, or even a seasoned target, I would wait, a considerable amount of time. If you're thinking about getting into financial endeavors, or getting into a relationship or something, I would suggest that you wait till this stuff mellows out, because you have to, instead of trying to figure out what they're going to do next, instead of trying to process how this is going to go and how you're going to solve, how you're going to live your life, because that is always the dilemma. You have things that you have to do, but you have to simplify. Okay. And, the problem with that, of course, you get into deprivation, because, this stuff can last for quite a while. The methodology of deprivation is part of the emotional the roller coaster that they're going to put you on. Okay. Because you're either getting a lot of stimuli, you're either experiencing aggressive harassment or obvious harassment, or you're not experiencing anything at all, and they've sensitized you or boxed you in a way where you're isolated, you're afraid to trust anybody, your relationships aren't there, you don't have the social interactions, and it can get really bad to the point where you might be living in your vehicle, you don't have plumbing, you don't have this, you don't have that, and they've hacked your phone, you're scared of everything, you know, and you're feeling, that deprivation. And I've talked about that before in MK Ultra. They did that. You're not designed to live that way. Okay, the reward system in your brain needs stimuli. Okay, and I've noticed that before because I've been boxed in by gang stalking in a lot of different scenarios before, and that I think that plays into the substance abuse. When you get into countries or societies that experience a lot of war or oppression, people turn to drugs. They will turn to alcohol or other substances to try to make up for the joy and those rewards that normally you'd be having if you were living a normal life. Okay, you can experience a lot of different addictions. You might even be getting into food addiction or whatever. You start smoking way too many cigarettes if you got a smoking problem. I quit a few years ago. I think it was in 2021. But there were days where I would smoke to the point where my lungs were sore. I couldn't stop. I was just so stressed out, and I was trying to make up for it. Or back when I was taking tranquilizers or drinking alcohol, and even if you don't do that, you're still going to be in that state of deprivation, and that can lead to depression. And depression is a pretty serious. I mean, it sounds weak compared to the startling anxiety that a lot of targets are probably experiencing right now. And I've heard people say that, well, I don't know, I could handle some depression right now. This is, I'm running for my life. Well, it's on the way because this stuff goes in stages, and they take you on that roller coaster, and you're either running for your life or you're sitting around, and they want you to be in that state of despair, right? Hopelessness. And if you're one of those targeted individuals that's been doing this for a long time, well, that's going to accumulate as well, because and I've talked about the fact that this stuff can switch. Okay, I've seen it switch for years before, where I literally thought it was over. And you hear a lot of targets talking about, oh, my gang stalking is over here. I've got a formula. I'm free now. You gotta do this or that. And they may have found things that helps, whatever they're dealing with. But if you're one of those targets that's experiencing the higher forms of harassment, I would wait a long time. I would follow a set of protocols. That's what I do. And I wouldn't try to figure out what's coming next. I would just simplify my life. I would work on my health, my finances, depending on what you're dealing with. You can make the decision whether you're going to take a chance with relationships, maybe try to find a spouse or whatever, or a partner. But you know what? It depends on what you're dealing with. But if you're following a protocol, you don't have to sit around and worry about it. You're just doing exactly what the protocol tells you to do, right? It's pretty simple. And the thing about harassment is they want to make your life full of ordeals. They want you playing whack-a-mole, and they want to wear you out. And if you're following a set of protocols and you're not trying to anticipate, figure out, and get into that solution based mental grind that's going to drive you crazy because you're out of control of this scenario, get into that game mentality. Well, you're canceling out a lot of stress that they want to inflict on you, you know. And the thing that you want to remember is that you're going to be flipped in between those forms of stimuli. I'm gonna go into the comments real quick and see what's going on here because I've noticed a few popping up on my little tangent here. The Kill Bill tune, huh? Interesting. Plausible deniability. Absolutely, Lisa Grant, because that is involved in gang stalking in a major way. Because when you get into sensitization, when you get into those little hidden forms of communication or harassment, the covert techniques, once a target has been sensitized, once they have been made aware of this game, it's just a matter of triggering someone. They're already stressed out, they're already angry, right? They're already sleep deprived or whatever, and if they react, they try to tell anybody what's going on, or they try to confront someone after it becomes covert and sarcastic, stalling tactics, all these little games. There's plausible deniability. You're pretty much screwed if you open your mouth. Absolutely. Let's take a look at some of this stuff. Bora Bora, I feel that it's emotional abuse. Absolutely is. It's 100% torture. It's murder is what it is. You know, gang stalking is a covert form of murder, and it's a way to kill someone after torturing them for extended periods of time and getting off on it. It's completely sadistic. Let's go into some more comments here. Lisa Grant, being Rambo doesn't work. Maybe a wash sense of human, decompressed prayer as well. The Rambo thing absolutely doesn't work. I mean, if you were dealing with a few individuals, or even maybe a group of individuals, you might be able to get away with that depending on who you are and what you know. But if you're a true targeted individual in the sense that you're experiencing that all encompassing harassment, if you're getting bombarded from everywhere, no, it's not going to work. You are setting yourself up. Absolutely. Let's getting in here. Okay, we got sorry about the silence here. I'm just reading through the comments. Yeah. Lindy Ellinger finally caught alive. Well, welcome, sweetie. Well, hi there, Ephesians. Yeah, he just asked me when my next live broadcast is. I usually don't announce it, and I kind of do it spontaneously, and that's just the way I am. In fact, I didn't even plan on doing a live stream tonight, but let's go a little bit further here. Um, the significance that is involved in sensitization, it goes into that little code that anyone it can be used on anyone. Does anybody out there have an example of something that they've been sensitized to? Well, these comments, the color red. Okay. Well, that's a good example of the atmospheric tyranny that can be inflicted upon the target because what's a very common color, and what's something that's going to get your attention. Obviously the color red is going to smack you right in the face. Okay, and it's popular. Okay, and it's everywhere, so it plays right into the strategy of gang stalking, in the sense that if you make a big deal out of that, not only is there plausible deniability, but you're going to be ridiculously surrounded by it, and you're inevitably going to read into that. It plays right into that atmospheric tyranny that they will use in the strategy of gang stalking, because that's really what happens. Okay. The brainwashing process produces a type of propositional tyranny in all targets in some form or fashion, but you cannot process that as mental illness and you cannot internalize that, because if you start feeling guilty about it, if you start, questioning yourself without realizing what's happening, well, you're playing into their strategy too, because they want you to internalize this stuff. They want you to feel guilty. They want to use shame tactics on the targeted individual, and they want you to feel, helpless. That's really what's going on here. Let's take a look and see what's going on. Uh, They pound loudly or kick the apartment door 24/7. It's a metal door. Noise campaigns. Yeah, that's a good one right there. And it doesn't have to be something that's really loud either. At first it's going to be right, because they've got to get your attention. And sometimes those little campaigns can drag on, right? It can be synchronized. A lot of targeted individuals are going to deal with synchronized sensitizations. I've experienced things before where it might be right when I wake up or something, and I've heard of other targets talking about that. Somebody will bang on the door, as the example given in the comments, or they will do something else. They'll throw something at your dwelling, or make some other kind of noise, or they might even plant some type of device in the targeted individual's dwelling, which is, when you get into this stuff, it's devious, man. I mean, the break-ins are real, okay, and it doesn't always involve. I mean, you can't come to the conclusion that you're dealing with that. Sometimes you could be dealing with things that are spiritual as well. So you don't even know, you know, what you could be dealing with. I've had that happen. I mean, people have accused me, of making a big deal out of, my experiences, but I'm gonna tell you, I've had things, knocked around in my house before, and I know there wasn't, devices involved. I've had both. I've had people do that too. I've had speakers installed and stuff like that. I remember when I was living in the trailer. If you guys have watched my first video, um, and this is a little story I've told before, but I it involves all the elements of this, okay? Because it was synchronized to when I would lay down to go to bed. Okay, I'd turn the lights off, lay down in my bed, and I would hear a loud stereo coming down the street. At least that's what it sounded like. And it was it's basically a loud subwoofer, right? But it would fade in and fade out. Okay, so I would lay down, and the volume would increase, and I'd be laying there, and it would just get so ridiculously loud, and it would literally be shaking the trailer. I mean, it would sound like the windows were gonna break, man. Okay, and this is after, decades of harassment. So I'm thinking I won't react, this, but it was a retirement community for the most part. That kind of stuff was illegal, and I'm thinking maybe they're just trying to get me in trouble. So I get up, I get out of bed, I'd start walking down the hallway towards the kitchen, and it would start to fade out. It sounded like they were right out in the parking space. And of course, by the time I got to the living room, it'd be gone. I'd look out the window, and there would be nothing there. And this went on for, I mean, every night for weeks. And finally, I was like, well, I'm going to go get. I didn't have a security system at this time, and I went and got one of those cheap Harbor Freight cameras for, like, I don't know, it's like $25, and I hooked it up to my little VHS. It was an old VHS combo DVD, and I thought, well, go ahead and do it tonight. I'm going to find out who you are. I had the camera pointing right out in the driveway. You could see all the way down the stretch of the street coming up to the trailer. And of course, it happened. And I'm laying in bed, and I'm thinking, good, I got to find out who this is. And, of course, as usual, I get out of bed and I walk down the hallway, and it starts to fade out. And of course, the obvious thing that goes along with that was, how would they know, right? This is what was going through my, how would they know when how can they see me getting out of bed and walking down the hallway, and how do they know when to leave? Right? That was one of the things that was plaguing me. And I'm thinking, well, I've had the cameras in my house and all that stuff before. So, I mean, you start wondering all this stuff. How else, right? When people get attacked, when targeted individuals get attacked with personal information that might involve things that are going on in their dwelling, or conversations that are happening in the privacy of their own home, how the hell would they know? right? And so I look at the tape, and there's no one there. There was no one anywhere to be found. And I'm thinking, well, there's obviously a speaker, because at that point in time, I'd caught several individuals, getting underneath the trailer, and they would take off running. And for a while, they were wait until I would go to sleep. They would take the siding off and go under there, and then when I'd lay down, they would hit the floor with a hammer and then take off. And of course, I'm crippled, and I can't really chase them. So, I mean, it was scary. It just make you jump. I mean, it was like they hit the floor from underneath as hard as they could with I don't know, like a mallet or something, man. Just boom. And they'd wait like 20 minutes. You're just about ready to fall asleep. Stuff like that. And, it's synchronized. And then, of course, what are your options? Right. I mean, let me see what you guys are talking about out there. Yeah. By the time I look outside my door, they're gone. And then it really gets creepy when, you put a camera out there or something, and then, it's like one of those sci-fi movies or whatever where you don't even know how it's happening. And they will play games like that. I mean, they might not be able to do that, as far as your door is concerned, but I would definitely invest in a camera. But of course, at that point, then what happens? Then you get accused of being paranoid, or maybe you're on drugs or something like that, because anytime you do something that would look paranoid to people who aren't experiencing, they don't, normal people don't usually have cameras everywhere. Some people do, depends, but you can experience that type of persecution. But and it kind of plays into it as well. Let me see what else. They refused to help me at the hospital. Johnny Caps. Well, what did you what did you tell them at the hospital? Because if you I'm just going to assume, because I don't know if you're going to reply to me or not. I'm going to assume that you told them that people were after you. Okay? If you did, um well, of course that's just going to fit the criteria of psychiatry, which, and I've talked about that before, is very suspicious when it comes in, to when you look at all the stuff involved in psychiatry, it's completely corrupt anyway. Okay. It's 100% designed to infiltrate society. It goes into a complete a Marxist agenda where people are, infiltrated. The physician's office is completely infiltrated. When you get into some of the agendas that are going on now, it's your doctor that you kind of have to watch out for. I was studying this stuff up the last couple of weeks, even when you get into the early screening for cancer, especially if you're a woman with breast cancer screening and stuff like that. You can look into this yourself, but there's no difference in mortality for early screening, and it's pushed on people in ways that make them feel guilty if they don't do it. And they change the ages all the time. So you can, oh, younger women should get it, or, well, you got to wait till you're 40 or whatever. But the problem is that you have three different kinds of cancer, because our ways of detecting cancer are so sophisticated now that they can find cancer in a lot of people that the cancer is not going to hurt them. Right. So you've got three kinds. You've got the turtle, you've got the rabbit, and you've got the bird. Okay. The bird flies out. No matter what you do to the individual who's got that type of cancer that's going to progress quickly, you're not going to save them no matter what you do. You're just going to end up torturing them. Okay. With chemo or whatever, which has a 97% failure rate, by the way. And doctors get paid cash in hand, 40% of the money, 90% paid by your insurance or Medicaid to prescribe chemotherapy, just in case anybody wanted to know that little tidbit. And not only that, when you get into the rabbit type of cancer, which would progress, and you might experience some benefits from different types of therapy, which I wouldn't recommend chemo or radiation. I would go with the natural stuff. From what I can tell, sugar, people fast and all that, to where their cancer literally goes into remission. You've heard of people going on fasts or whatever. They might go on a water fast and pray and fast, and then their cancer, diminishes. Well, it's because it feeds on sugar, a lot of them. And then you get into the type of cancer that everybody has, that normally would have gone undetected. But what happens is you end up, giving them all kinds of treatments that are just going to hurt them, right? And can't the breast cancer is a bad one. Prostate cancer is another one. If you guys want to watch a good video on that, if there's any men out there, watch the prostate hoax, right? There's no difference in mortality. You can get your prostate taken out and you're going to live just as long as if you didn't. You might make like a year or two difference, and you get into lead time bias. I mean, the physician office has been invaded. When you get into psychiatry, getting back to going to the hospital and talking about this stuff, well, you're just going to get diagnosed as mentally ill, right? That's now you've been discredited. That's what they want. They want to scare the target into something to where they either get confronted by law enforcement or they run and tell people. And then what happens if they're normal people, they're gonna wonder what's wrong with you. They're not going to understand because they've never experienced it, and they might get a hold of a doctor or suggest that you go to a doctor. And of course, you tell that doctor, what are they going to do? You're mentally ill. You're crazy. That's not possible for all these people to be after you. And you're having a persecutory delusion. You're suffering from schizophrenia. You're in a psychosis or whatever. Okay, it's going to happen 100% of the time. You would probably have better luck talking to a minister, but even then, you can run into problems. Okay, but at least they would be open to the demonic option, and if they're worth their you know if they know anything about the biblical material that they're supposed to, they're going to know that that stuff is possible. And I've talked about the fact that at the foundation, I believe all this stuff is demonic. I don't care if it's an extended MK Ultra program or whatever's going on. People are being influenced demonically ultimately. And that's a problem, to where when you're looking around at society, the invasion, not only into your physician's office, but it's happening in churches, it's happening in public schools, all this stuff. It goes back. If any of you guys want to watch a good documentary on, how all this stuff has just gotten so crazy that you're experiencing in society right now. Grinding Down America, Agenda 1 and 2 by Curtis Bowers. If you can watch that out there, I might want to put that in the playlist for you guys. In fact, I think I will after the live stream, because it explains, some of the mechanical stuff going on, and how all these things are happening, and that plays into the government agenda as well. Okay, because when you get into that stuff, when you try to explain what was going on in MK Ultra, you have to get into the aspect of mind control. Okay, it's Machiavellian. You get into all the things that were going on, and subconscious messaging, so on and so forth. I've talked about the Mandela effect. That's part of it. Okay, I don't know if it's if you could put under the same title as MK Ultra, but it was a mass gaslighting campaign, and I'm basically certain that elements of the government were involved in that. Absolutely. Okay, there's people out there that would say that it was false memories from a supercomputer. I don't believe that. And I experienced a lot of those things, and there was people that talked about that. There's people out there that experience controlled programming, and there's a lot of different ways. That's really freaky. When a target starts experiencing that kind of stuff, you are definitely dealing with some spiritual things there, and that can happen. Actually, I made a video on that. If any of you guys are experiencing the controlled programming, where you feel like you're getting directed conversations, when you're watching, television, or when you're listening to radio or whatever, watching news casts and stuff like that, that will help explain some of the phenomena going on there, because the brainwashing that targeted individuals experience has them looking at everything differently. Okay, and people are attacked in mass. So once you've become sensitized to something, it can be used whether it be, and it's going to sound really crazy, but I've seen this kind of stuff and I've talked to targets to experience it. It can be used on a different type of broadcast or in a movie or something like that. Different themes can be added. And then what's going to happen? Well, anybody who's been sensitized to those things, however it works, they're going to take that personally and then they're going to wonder if it was there just for them. But of course, they're just part of the targeted crowd of individuals who, whatever the sensitization that has been accomplished, the brainwashing, it's just they're targeting people in mass. A lot of people they don't even want to go in that direction, but you have to because some targets are dealing with that. I'm going to take a look at what's going on in the comments again. If it is the demons, if you rebuke it in Jesus' name, the demons leave. If you don't stop, then it's technology. Well, I would say that that can happen that way, but I would not say that it simply happens every time you try to rebuke a demon that it's just going to walk away. Okay, that would I mean think about it. They fight, and you can get into biblical examples to where the disciples couldn't cast out a demon, and Christ rebuked him and said, you guys need to fast and pray. You got to fight this thing. Of course, Christ had ultimate authority. He doesn't have to do that, but he instructed his disciples that this is not something that is just going to, be, abracadabra. Okay. And, thinking about it logically, if everything was an instantaneous deliverance, no one would grow spiritually. Okay. And I get a lot of people that they become dismayed or whatever. They'll say, I had this addiction in my life and I prayed about it, but nothing ever happens. Doesn't seem like anything's. I said, well, what are you doing? I said, are you drawing near to God? Are you spending time in the Word of God? Or are And I've had things, and I'm just going to tell you right now that I've dealt with. I'm not necessarily going to go into the specifics of it. I've had attacks, demonic attacks, that it took me years before it stopped. Okay. And sometimes the only relief I would get is when I would just spend hours and hours studying, drawing near to God, reading the Bible and so on and so forth. They don't just back off. And you can't assume because, uh, you know, that you don't get delivered or they just don't. I mean, well, you mentioned the name of Jesus. Now we got to leave. Sometimes that happens, but by and large, people they don't experience instantaneous deliverances. They have to walk through a process, and that allows them to mature and have a relationship with God. And I'll be honest with you, I learned a lot during those times when I was battling and fighting those types of things. And it goes into that weird stuff where things are getting knocked around in your house, or you're dealing with sleep paralysis, or something starts talking to you, and it's like, what the hell is going on here? It's creepy. It's real. Spiritual attack is real. There was one example where I was over at a girl's house, and things started happening like that, and her dog went into a seizure. It was just creepy. I mean, it's frothing around. Things are getting knocked around in the house. It was beyond, and it didn't just walk away. Okay, I've run into those experiences before. In fact, the first time I ever dealt with something like that, I was paralyzed and I was pinned down to a bed, and it was in a dwelling where there was a lot of witchcraft going on, and I didn't know what was happening. And it took 2 hours or more. It might even been longer than that before I could even get out of that bed. I thought I was going to die there. I cried out to God, to save me. I'll do anything you want. I feel like I'm going to die, and I did. I really wondered if I was going to make it out of there. So I wouldn't assume that if just because you throw the name of Jesus around a little bit, if it doesn't stop, that it's some kind of a scalar wave or something. I think that would be a mistake. I would have to disagree with that. I think you're on the right track, but I wouldn't just assume anything. But the problem is, and I'll admit this, is it would be hard to tell in different circumstances what you were dealing with, because you could be dealing with things that are technological and not understand what's happening. I mean, if somebody who is experiencing V2K in a legitimate sense, um, how do you know what's going on? Well, that's a tough one, man. And I would just say this, that I think in those scenarios that the solution is the same, right? Even if you suspect, I mean, think about it. Even if you suspect that you're dealing with broadcast frequencies, sound to ear, or V2K, or whatever, an implant, a satellite, whatever, radio waves, you draw near to God either way, right? I mean, he's Lord over everything, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stop. If God was just going to intervene in everything, life wouldn't be the way it is. There's a demonstration going on, and a fundamental reality is being displayed, and that is what happens when you move into knowledge, and then you move from knowledge into the knowledge of sin, and then you move into well, why isn't it okay to have sin, and why is it what's the problem with not submitting to God? Well, we're living in it right now. We are living in a world that basically represents the fruit of that mentality. Okay, what is it? It's horrible. Okay, and that's part of the demonstration, and it's not going to be easy. It's not pleasant, and for targeted individuals, it's even worse. But I think there's a special grace. I think there's a place in God's schedule for people who are afflicted. The Word of God says that God draws near to the brokenhearted, and I've talked. In fact, I think I was dealing with this in the comments earlier, that what's going to happen to targets. I think it was Ephesians 6:10, and that was what's going to happen to people that experience gang stalking long term. What's going to be the outcome for these people? Well, it depends on what they do. It depends on what's happening, and just because someone keeps getting attacked or they're experiencing gang stalking doesn't mean that God is not working something out for your benefit. Okay. So, but it just depends on what you do, and that's the tragedy, in my opinion, when people they separate the spiritual application and go straight to technology. Period. I mean, you're missing the benefit of what you're experiencing. You're missing the fundamental reality of who you are, where you came from and where you're going. And if you can benefit from this in a sense that you draw near to God, your your eternal future is going to be impacted in such a positive way by this that words don't describe. How much you are going to thank God that these problems actually came into your life and that He was able to work that out. It can work out for the benefit. So I think I would put a positive spin on this. Let's take a look and see what's going on in the comments here. So Lindy Ellinger is experiencing break-ins. It looks like it's gaslighting and it's fear tactics as well. When someone breaks into your house, what are they doing? What are they doing in there? I've had a lot of break-ins. That's a huge part of gang stalking, the invasion, right? Because gang stalking is basically an invasion in every area of your life. They are invading your personal space. They are invading your mind. They are invading your life. Okay, and then what do you do about it, right? And it causes a lot of stress, a lot of fear, um, and you don't know what they're doing. And so the paranoia is exponential. And even after, because it was years when the stuff it stopped. I mean, I was still dealing with a lot of weird stuff, but that all encompassing, street theater and all that direct conversations, all that stuff pretty much stopped for a number of years. and the break-ins were very infrequent. But even after years where it wasn't really an issue, I still had a huge problem, wondering, if someone had gotten in and done something. And then when something happens, now you got to really worry about it. I had a lot of that where I would, have the food tampering and all those things. And then and it was right after I would buy groceries. I'd buy maybe $300-400 worth of groceries. I'd do all my grocery shopping and then I'd have a break in. And, you know, at first you just process it like, well, if somebody was going to do that, people think that if somebody's trying to poison you or do something to you, that they're just automatically going to go to jail. And then when you start researching this stuff, or you have it happen to you a number of times where you experience it, the food tampering or whatever, you realize that these people will probably get away with it. And, and until they get caught red-handed, or until Christ comes back, or they end up in front of him at the judgment throne. Who knows what's going to happen? Even when spouses poison their significant other, a lot of times, even if the doctor suspects that they've been poisoned and they don't have a smoking gun, there's plausible deniability. There it is again, right? Because, this person had problems with depression 10 or 15 years ago. Maybe they drank the, antifreeze because they wanted to kill themselves. Right. Yeah. Like you're going to do that. Right. But that prosecutors, they're hesitant to go after them, and they will usually wait until somebody else dies. They collect the life insurance on one person and they're like, well, I guess we'll have to wait for the second victim and then dig up the first one, you know, because it's just crazy. And, to make matters even more complicated, when targets are dealing with this stuff, it's usually not something that would even show up, right? It could be covert. It could be, or maybe even a street drug or something like that. I've heard of people talking about, getting drugged with ecstasy for some reason. That's like a popular thing that they want to slip in your food, or LSD, or something else. But even if it's not that, it's probably going to be something that just might make you feel sick. I remember when this whole thing started happening to me, I got that kind of street theater and direct to conversation. And I actually had a guy, directly asking to look in my fridge. This guy was hanging around my house, and, eventually, he starts talking to me and, asked me if I smoked weed. And I did back then. And he wanted to come up and smoke some weed with me. So I let him in. I've told this story before. And then he asked if he could look at my fridge. And I said, well, what do you want to do that for? Are you thirsty? Is there something I can get you? Are you hungry or whatever? And he's, no, I just want to look. And I'm like, well, there it is. Voila. And he starts talking about all these things that you could do to the condiments and the milk, and how it could cause cancer and kill people. And you can covertly murder someone. And I'm like, this guy's obviously trying to mess with my head. Right. And so I just kind of ignored him, figured he was an unfortunate. And back then I was not crippled. I was, I had wrestled for 15 years. I was in martial arts for decades. And I was, into lifting weights. And I thought, well, I don't really have anything. If this guy gets out of line, I'll just, put him back in line. And of course, the next time he comes over, I was kind of smart alecky, and I reached in my fridge and took a big swig off of a little, milk carton thing. And he says to me, he says, well, when people start breaking into your house, then you're gonna pay attention to us. There was actually other people in my house when he said it too. And he said it at a loud enough volume where I heard him. And I said, what are you talking about? And I've got to leave. And he walked away. But 2 weeks later, guess what happens? I wake up in the middle of the night. My clothes are taken off. People had broken into my house, and they were very obvious. They moved a bunch of stuff around. They slammed the door. You could see him leaving. They drugged me. It got my attention. Absolutely. And that's the stuff you're dealing with. But even more than that, then you get into the synergistic stuff. And I'm not trying to make anybody paranoid, but when you get into synergistic poisoning, that goes into gaslighting. So you can put something, and if anybody out there doesn't know what synergistic poisoning is, you get, two or more chemicals combined. So in other words, Someone, if they wanted to gaslight you or play a little game with you, they could put something on the food that everybody was going to eat, and they could, slip something else that would react with that in a drink or maybe in your hygiene products or something you're going to come in contact with prior to the meal. And nothing's going to happen to you until you start eating that food with everybody else. But of course, you're going up to the barbecue or whatever you're doing. Everybody else is eating the food, or they may do that to the food in your fridge. So if other people come over and you say, "Oh no, if somebody's trying to poison me," and they'll, "I don't know, let me eat it." And if they eat it, nothing's going to happen to them, right? Because they are not exposed to the other chemical or other chemicals that are going to cause that reaction. And it's a perfect way to gaslight the targeted individual, get them to think they're crazy. Okay, it's very when you get into this stuff, it gets complex. Okay, and the break-ins, ugh, yeah, that's a big part of gang stalking. Let's see what's going on out there. Wow. Yeah, Nicholas. Yeah, he's had the break-ins. Wow. They want you to be afraid for your life. They want you to be in fear mode. Your brain doesn't work right when you're in that fight or flight mode. It just doesn't work. I mean, talk about short circuiting someone's life. You know, when a targeted individual is traumatized and they're put into that state of paranoia and fear, I mean, it's hard to function, and that goes into the financial destitution that targeted individuals experience too, because it always happens. It doesn't necessarily mean that all targets are going to end up homeless, but you're going to experience workplace harassment. You're going to experience, excess bills. A lot of targets will talk about, problems with the bank. I had to quit doing online banking because somebody was getting in there and setting off alarms all the time. I would try to go in, I would try to use my card, everything was shut down. And finally, like the seventh time I went to my bank, I was like, you know what? Let's just close this down. And I'm just going to come in and shut this whole thing. Oh, are you sure we can? No, just forget about it. I haven't done online banking since. And then you get into the problem of where you got to explain things to people. Well, I wonder what's happening. Who could be doing all these things? And you're like, well, oh, gee, I don't know. There's no way to win in that scenario because you can't talk about it. You can't get into your scenario really. Well, we've talked about the deprivation. We've talked about the different levels of intensity. And let's talk a little bit about something positive because we've talked about all these negative things, all these things that happen to targeted individuals, the traumatization, the brainwashing, the sensitization, the fear campaign, the discrediting, the break-ins, the workplace harassment, the financial destitution, the emotional roller coaster. And we've also talked about the fact that there is a spiritual element to gang stalking, and I don't want anybody to forget that even though you cannot just like I was talking about before, just mention the name of Christ and solve all these problems. Okay, I would I would bet that there are people that have been delivered from this. But like I said, usually when God allows something into your life, He does it for a reason. I don't think He's determining it, and He's obviously not the author of those things. But He can take over and He can work it out for your benefit. And the thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of intense harassment, and there's been a lot of times where I've experienced some pretty intense scenarios that were very exhausting. Sometimes it goes on for a long time, but I would also experience a time of refreshment. Okay. And when you spend time in the Word of God or you spend time drawing near to God, and just just realizing that this whole world, whatever you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with the workplace harassment or whether family members have turned against you, that this whole world has been hijacked. It is under the tyranny of the kingdom of darkness. Okay, so whether you're getting in to the secret societies or the government programs or the witchcraft, the occult, or just sadistic people who are just evil, who are just torturing you, who are feeding on you, trying to control you. Um, that's why. Okay, that's why you see government programs like MK Ultra, because people are twisted. Okay, they're influenced demonically, but in the midst of all these things, the Bible does promise that we can experience peace. Okay, and I've had that happen, and God is not going to let you down. Okay, you're going to go to the edge of your patience level. Okay, you're going to be taken beyond what you can handle. And if you press in and you ask God for help, He's going to make up the difference. Okay. It's very important to remember that. Like I said before, missing out on that opportunity to realize your purpose and to realize the reality of Christ and of what He accomplished, and what the gospel is, and how after Acts, after Pentecost, it's prophecy fulfilled. Psalm 82 talks about the Son of Man, the Christ, inheriting the nations. That's what Jesus did. When the demoniac ran up to Christ, when he went out of the territory of the Hebrews across the Sea of Galilee, they knew who he was. This was an individual that was possessed, by many demons, by unclean spirits. And, they knew that eventually he was going to inherit the nations, because God handed over the nations to the principalities and powers after the Tower of Babel. And, when the gospel went out, the fullness of the nations, or the Gentiles, that's what we're in. We're coming to the end of that. Okay. And when you're looking at all that stuff in the Middle East, when you're looking at all the trouble over there, that's the lineage of the Antichrist, in my opinion. I think that he's going to be a Muslim. And I think that when you get into the true meaning of Armageddon, you are dealing with the end. Okay. And that's going to be before the millennium, unless you don't believe in a millennium. But either way, when you look into that, you were talking about a flood. And they've already even mentioned these things, to where they are going to flood. The call went out for all the Muslims to flood Jerusalem. And that's what Armageddon is going to be. Okay. This Antichrist, or the lawless one, or the son of perdition, is going to gather these Muslim nations together, which are pretty much all over the Middle East right now. And they're going to attack the Jews. There's going to be a massive slaughter. Okay. And, technically, I should probably make a video and tell them to get the hell out of there. I mean, someone should. I think Urban Baxter was talking about that, because that's what's going to happen. And you can mark my words. We are closing in to the end of this whole thing. The gospel has been preached throughout the world. We are moving into that final stage, and there's going to be a huge assault. There's going to be a huge slaughter. It's going to make what just happened with Hezbollah look like child's play. And we're moving towards it. I don't know how long it's going to be before that happens. But Christ is going to return. And when he does, things are going to be different. Okay. And that's really the hope of the targeted individual. And you can know that when Christ returns, all these things are going to be put in order. Okay. But until then, you're experiencing that tyranny, and you can have that refreshment, but it's going to be in the midst of persecution. I'm going to see if anybody has any other comments real quick. Janet Jenna Heinecker talks about being fumed, it looks like. They can sensitize you to those things as well. That's a very good point, because targets will be attacked in that way. They will be sensitized to all different kinds of things. And when you get down to it, they don't want you to feel safe anywhere. They want the target to be paranoid in public, in your house, even if you go out into the country or whatever. You're going to experience those directed conversations and those forms of harassment that would lead the target to believe that no matter where they go, no matter what they're doing, they are being watched. Okay, and people are not happy with what they're doing. But I want to end on a positive note that, like I said before, you can experience times of refreshing. And I've experienced that in my own life and my own experience with gang stalking. And I want to end on that note. I also want to thank all the people who have helped support the channel. God bless you. I love you. And be good to yourselves. Be safe.